Well, it's that time of the year again. This week we celebrate Valentine's Day. It is yet another holiday rife with all sorts of stories of what its history is. Was it simply Christian festivals and holidays celebrating the lives of martyrs? Was it a Roman pagan celebration that included a lottery system where women were chosen out of a lottery and forcibly matched up with a male who could do whatever they wanted with them? Uh, did Valentine's come from somebody imprisoned who wrote notes to the woman that he loved during that time? I don't know. I'm not going to go into the history in this episode. I don't really care about the history of it in this episode. What I do know is that if it wasn't for Valentine's Day, you probably wouldn't even know that the Hallmark card company existed. And that's just one of the reasons why I hate the holiday, and we're going to talk about it today. Welcome to Fusion. I'm your host, Brendan Saunders. Today we're going to discuss the integration of faith when it comes to the topic of Valentine's Day. Before we do that, SNL, please subscribe to the channel. Please click the notify button so that you can be aware every time I drop a video. And please hit the thumbs up like button. So Valentine's Day is here, and it is a holiday that I hate. I don't even really consider it a holiday. Yes, there's a commercialism. I in the opening I mentioned that I hate it because you wouldn't know that Hallmark existed, and I acknowledge that. Like there's this whole part of it today, which is about driving candy and cards, the selling of these items that normally this would be a dead time for them. And so I get it. I don't particularly like it. I hate it, in fact, but I get it. And so my dislike of the holiday really doesn't center around that as much as just the whole, and maybe this is because I'm a contrarian, just the whole idea of being told to do something for my wife. That's really the crux of what bothers me. The fact that you think that you need to tell me to be romantic with my wife. Man, get out of here with that. But the other side of this is something that I often talked about when I was a pastor, which is that if you are a man and the only time that you are romantic with your wife is when you're being told to because of the holiday, if the only time as a man that you buy your wife flowers or candies, and maybe your wife doesn't like candies, but you know what she likes. You know what treat she likes. You know whether it's a certain drink, whether it's a certain food, whatever it is. And as a husband, if the only time that you think of surprising your wife and doing something romantic for her is because it's Valentine's Day, then you're a jerk and you're a loser. Okay, maybe you're not a jerk and a loser, but you're exhibiting the behavior. You're exhibiting the behavior of a jerk, or what I'm trying to say is, man, you should be expressing your love to your wife all the time. If you don't know how to express your love to your wife in a way that will reach her, that she'll feel it and understand it, then I highly recommend that you go buy a book called The 5 Love Languages by a gentleman named Gary Chapman. In The 5 Love Languages, he lays out the 5 general ways in which people receive romantic expressions. Right? So if I give you the 5 real quick: words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, physical touch. Those are the 5 general ways. So for instance, my wife is an acts of service person. So when I want to express my love for my wife, I vacuum and I do the dishes. I do acts of service. I do things around the house that I know are burdensome for her. It's burdensome for her to work full time, come home, be taking care of our daughter, also be trying to clean the house, that kind of thing. So the more things that I can take off of her plate, the more she feels, this is emotion, she feels love from me. Right? So me, I'm a physical touch kind of guy. One of the number one ways that I feel loved is when my wife does something as simple as we're sitting together, maybe in a movie theater, driving down the road together, and she slips her hand. Maybe she places her hand on my thigh, on my leg. Maybe she places her hand in my hand. Physical touch. I get home, she gives me a hug. Right? Those are ways that I feel. And listen, you can have mixes in this. You can have mixes like physical touch for me, but also words of affirmation. When my wife uses her words to build me up, I feel loved. So again, you should get The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. I will try to remember to put a link to this in the description, but in case I forget, you should go get The 5 Love Languages. Because what can happen is that you're trying to express romance and love to your partner and they're not receiving it and you're getting frustrated. And a great example of that is that my number one way to express love, whether it's to my wife or to people in general, is through gift giving. When I want to say thank you to somebody, I immediately think, what can I get them to say thank you? So early in my marriage, I'm married to my wife, and I would get her gifts. And I couldn't figure out why she never took those gifts and received them the way I thought. I thought it was going to be, the raining down of confetti and the expressions of love and gratitude. And usually she was like, how much did this cost? Because receiving gifts is very low on her ways, is a very low love language for her. So on her ways of receiving love, she doesn't feel loved when I would give her these gifts. All she really cared about was, oh no, did he clear out our bank account to give me this gift? Right? So sometimes you are spending ways trying to express romance and love to your partner, and you don't realize you're not hitting their language. You're hitting either your own language or you're just not hitting their languages. So again, the 5 love languages: words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, acts of service, physical touch. Back to my point about Valentine's Day. If Valentine's Day is the only time that you express romance and love to your spouse, especially as a guy, then you're a jerk. I'm sorry, you're exhibiting the behavior of a jerk. Listen, Ephesians chapter 5. Most women in the church hate Ephesians chapter 5 because whenever it's preached on or taught, all that you're ever told is that wives need to submit to their husbands. And I understand that, women. You have the right to be upset that every time that this passage is taught, the emphasis is on how wives need to submit to their husbands. The reason why you can be upset about that is because before it says that wives are to submit to their husbands, verse 21 of Ephesians chapter 5 says something which sets the tone for the rest of the verses. And here's what it says: submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Now, depending on what Bible translation you use, they put that line in different areas. And by that I mean trying to decide, does it go with the previous paragraph or does it go with this the next paragraph? Where exactly does it go? What seems to be clear grammatically is that it's setting the tone for what's to come. And so it is the line setter. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. How do you do that? Well, verse 22, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Verse 25, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. Look at it that way. Those are the three lines that go together. Any sermon that forgets to put that context, any sermon that preaches to the wives and then preaches to the husband, but forgets that this is reverence for one another. This is reverence for one another, by the way, that's not only in the family, but in the church. In the church, we are supposed to be submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. In the family, this is how that concept is applied. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. What does that look like? Well, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. How does this relate to Valentine's Day? Well, what I often find is that the same men who don't express romance and love to their wives are the same men that complain, well, she's not submitting to me. Okay, but are you loving her as Christ loves the church? Because he gave himself for it. He literally gave his life for the church. Does your wife feel that way about you? When your wife looks at you and sees how you operate as a person, as a husband, as a father within this home, does she see a man who is willing to sacrifice of himself, of his time, of his energy, for the betterment of his family? Not a guy who just goes to work and brings home the paycheck, but a guy who sacrificially loves his family. Because if you do that, if you sacrificially love your family, then you will, by the way, express love and romance to your wife, because you will understand her desire for that. And you will do that more than once a year. You will do that consistently. You may do it so consistently that it becomes normal, right? You may surprise her with flowers so often that it just becomes a normal thing that every Friday you bring home flowers to your wife. Whoa, how about that? Didn't need Valentine's Day for that. It may become so normal that on days other than her birthday and Valentine's Day, she gets a card from you that expresses your feelings towards her. That's all I'm saying. I don't like to be told that I have to express romance to my wife, because I do my best to express romance and love, desire, deep commitment to my wife every day. I'm not perfect. She'll tell you I'm far from perfect. And we go through lulls, right? We go through ups and downs. You go through lulls. That's normal in life. That's normal in a relationship. That, yeah, you may go through a couple weeks in which you're not connecting deeply and intimately, but you realize that and you do what it takes to get back on track. You say, hey, we need to pray together more, or we need to do this. Let's have some time away. Often my wife and I will often, do date nights. We'll say, hey man, it's been 2-3 weeks. We've just been busy running, doing this, that, everything else. We need to go out, have a night out, reconnect. Let that, stir up the coal, the embers, and let that, give us what we need as we start to move forward. And sure, every time we do it, it's like righting the ship. It's like I wouldn't even say righting the ship, but I would say it empowers. Like I said, it stirs up the coals and it gets you going. And over the next 2-3 weeks, you're very aware of one another and you're very much feeding into one another. What builds up instead of tearing down? It has to be ongoing is my point. And the idea that for commercial reasons somebody's going to tell me to be romantic flies in the face of me as a person. And that's why I hate Valentine's Day. Because for me, I try to submit to my wife out of reverence for Christ. And the way that I submit to her out of reverence for Christ is that I try to love her the way he loved the church. Sacrificially. So, put that in your Cupid and smoke it. SNL on the way out. SNL on the way out. Subscribe, please. Subscribe to the channel. Please comment. I would love to hear your comments on this. Do you love Valentine's Day? Do you hate Valentine's Day as a man or a woman? Either way, I would love to hear. Please click the like button. Please click the notification bell. And, do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your Lord.